historical context, 1955 is the year after Brown versus Board. Prior to that, black schools in my area were funded by a separate county levy, so the intention of the 1955 law, as I understand it, was to put all those monies into the same bank and then redistribute them on the basis of equity. Is that right?
The money that you're talking about with the county levy, that went into the funding formula as what we call now county formula. 75% at the next interim study at 9:30, we'll talk a little bit about that and how that works with everyone. 75% of that is chargeable, but that county formula is where that county level or levy went.
Thank you. And so the purpose of that was to redress historic inequities in our school system and provide, as per the Constitution, that every student receive equal funding for equal opportunity to a good education.
Yes.
Representative Caldwell, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Sean, good to see you.
See you.
So you mentioned Enid earlier. Can you, across the way, is this primarily going to help urban schools, rural schools, evenly distributed? What would, if we funded something like this, who's that typically going to flow to?
Just let the record reflect, we used to share a back fence, so there may be some. Who would this help? It's not necessarily, or it wouldn't be suburban schools, which is pretty obvious because the valuation per student. The idea is for it to help schools that have a lower valuation per student. Historically, it's gotten worse for schools because the cost of construction has increased much more rapidly than local property values. So now you have schools that their full bonding capacity might go toward putting a roof on a building or some remodeling. There's no way they could replace aging buildings and those things. So we continue to see that shift over time as construction costs outpace local valuation. So states have this kind of fund to help ensure that those other students have adequate facilities.
For follow-up.
Thank you for that. So, it sounds from what you just said that this would help both kind of urban, maybe more inner city schools, as well as some of our smaller rural districts, which just doing the political math real quickly, that seems like those two groups would encompass a pretty large percentage of the legislature. So maybe that's something that we can move on pretty quickly. I know we've made some pretty historic investments in education back in the formula in the last couple of years. Maybe this is something we can, while still continuing with that investment, obviously, but maybe if we're looking at moving somewhere in the future, this year, maybe this is an area we need to look at.
I would agree. And speaking to the urban part, our public charter schools are primarily in our two urban settings, and they get $0 from the local revenue we talked about with bond funds. I actually left. No, that slide got hidden. Building funds or bond funds, your local public charter schools get $0 from either of those funds. So it would also help our local public charter schools that are in the urban settings, which have representation as well.
Representative Provenzono, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted a point of clarification because I think I heard 2013 we had the public charter brick and mortar could receive these dollars, and I wonder if you can clarify what your proposal or what the proposal is that you're going to make, because it seems like we already have the legislation in place for that to happen.
Well, at that time we got together with charter school representatives and said we need this for our poorest public schools, and also with the growth of charter schools, they were talking about needing capital dollars as well. And kind of what Representative Caldwell said, we're stronger together than we are separate. If we come to you with a plan that we both agree on, that we all agree on, we're more likely to have something pass. If they come to you with a plan and we're against it, or we come to you with a plan and they're against it, it's easier for you to vote no. And that's the political reality. So we don't know what that plan looks like. I'm not going to tell you anything's predetermined. My idea is for us to not recreate the wheel. As we talked about, there's only 4 states in the nation that has nothing in place, to look at what our peer states are doing that is working for them, how that works formula-wise or grant-wise. My preference would be that we have some kind of formula-based system, so it's not based on someone's determination who needs money or who wants money. And the Constitution kind of backs that up by saying there needs to be a formula developed by this legislature or approved by this legislature. I'm not sure you want to develop the formula, but you would like to approve that. So hopefully we can do a lot of the hard work behind the scenes and put our egos aside and say, we need to do this for all of Oklahoma's children.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Heim. All right, at this time, I would ask Randleman from the Academy of Seminole to come forward. I believe he had some slides as well. If you have not received those, please raise your hand and we'll give them to you.
Thank you, Representative Taylor. I appreciate the chance to come and share with you a little bit about what it's been like over the last year in creating and growing a charter school. As Representative Taylor mentioned, I'm Ren Hawthorne, the head of school of the Academy of Seminole. Dr. Heim talked to you a little bit about the overall realities of the bill, but what I'm here to talk to you about today is just kind of the reality of being on the ground and creating a charter school this last year and the realities of the facility problems that we ran into over this year. I want to share with you a little bit about the Academy. We opened in 2018 with grades 9 and 10 on the campus of Seminole State College. This year and this August, we expanded and opened from grades pre-K through 11th grade. And in doing that, really had to go out and find a new facility for our campus. We are an early college high school program, which means that we're focused on trying to help our students get prepared into college. And I'll talk to you a little bit about what that looked like over this last year for our students. As you probably are all aware, places like in Massachusetts, 75% of students go on from high school to college. In Oklahoma and in Seminole County, those numbers are a lot lower. So we're really working to try to increase those numbers so students in those areas have the chance for higher education. And as somebody who was the first in my family to go to college, that's something that's very important to me and important for our students in rural Oklahoma. As I mentioned, we really saw a tremendous growth at the Academy of Seminole this last year. We started out very small our first year with 30 students and have 300 students that joined us this fall in August. You can imagine that there's a lot of excitement that came with that, but also a lot of difficulties in trying to find funding and facilities to equip our facilities for that many students. We grew from 5 teachers to 17 teachers this year as well, and have students coming that applied from 17 different zip codes for us. Last year, just a little bit about our academic achievement. Our students came to us on average, when we did the MAP MWEA test, they grew by 82%. So that means whether they came to us excelling or came to us struggling, after 1 year with us, they grew faster than 82 out of 100 students who took that national test. A little bit about our efforts to try to help those students get into college. Of our sophomores who came back to us as juniors, 82% of those students are now enrolled full-time at Seminole State College. So they're spending 14 hours working on their associate's degree and then spending time with us working on their high school diploma at the same time. You may be familiar with Santa Fe Pathways. We're doing a similar model there where our students can work on getting their associate's degree at the same time that they're getting their high school diploma. I talked a little bit about this, so I'll skip it because I want to talk to you a little bit more about our facility challenges, but a little bit about our student body demographics. So we do have a little over a third of our students are minority students. We have our special education services, a little over 21% of our students have IEPs or 504s. So we do have a large group that we're servicing that are special ed students. And our student demographics in terms of our socioeconomic status, about 45%, and that's still growing because we're at the first of the year in identifying those students. We expect probably half of our students will end up being free and reduced lunches at our school. don't know if this is gonna play, it doesn't look like it's going to.
Do you want me to try?
You can click on it and see, but while, we won't go through the whole video, but I do wanna share with you just a little bit, it shows a little bit about our facilities in the video. I wanted you to kind of see what those look like.
Sorry.
It's not gonna do it.
No.
That's okay. So I can tell you just a little bit about our facilities. You can see there that it's the American Legion building in Seminole. But we really had, it's kind of hard to read up there, but we had trouble in locating and finding a facility. So when we grew this year to 300 students, we started a year ago, we had about 400 applicants, so we knew that we were gonna have a big growth this year. We started a year ago trying to find facilities for those students. And as Dr. Heim mentioned, we don't have the ability to do any bonding or our funding in terms of ad valorem dollars aren't there as well, or any district money. So that was a challenge for us. We went through 4 different facilities that we were trying to locate before we found this facility. In a small rural area, you can imagine finding a facility large enough for 300 students that was in a condition that we could use was very difficult. So we went through that process over the last year. That was probably our biggest challenge. Even in trying to grow that large, it was the facility piece that was the hardest for us. We ended up locating a facility this summer and had to really work hard to get that ready for this fall. And if you can see the American Legion building, it's a wonderful building for us. It's a great facility, but it really is just our main area that we have our cafeteria, our gymnasium, and some of our office space there. We had to bring in 14 classroom buildings that are portable buildings that surround that campus. That was really our only option in that area to find a facility that we could work with for those students. So this is really a temporary fix for us. We have a 2-year lease with the American Legion, and know that again, after that 2 years are up, we will be in the same boat and trying to find a facility or a long-term facility for our school. So I'm just here to kind of share with you what our challenges are. It's been a wonderful first year. It's great to see that these students are interested in working on pursuing their post-secondary opportunities, but really that facility funding is one of the most difficult things that we face this year. I'll open it up to questions or comments.
Members, we have 4 minutes available for questions. Representative Provenzano, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Is there a traditional brick and mortar within like a 50-mile radius of your school, or are you the only school that serves that area at the high school level?
Right, yes, so we are in Seminole, so there's Seminole Public Schools are there as well.
For follow-up.
And then is there you're a 9 to 12, correct?
We're pre-K through 11, and then we'll
Okay.
be pre-K through 12 next year.
And so your population is 300. Do you have an estimate on what their population size is, the public school there?
I don't know the exact number, just larger than what we are.
Representative Walker, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So prior to the creation of Seminole Academy, did the creation of Seminole Academy add one more school building and one more school campus to the existing population of public school students?
Yes, that's correct.
For follow-up.
So does that mean that the public school population of Seminole schools has one more building to maintain than they did before Seminole Academy?
So it's not Seminole Public Schools that maintain it, but it is in terms of our board and things that we're doing to maintain that facility.
For follow-up.
But the same number of students existing in Seminole Public Schools, but one more building dedicated to the school that has to be maintained, heated, lighted, etc.
Yeah, and I will say that a lot of our students come from Seminole Public Schools, but we have 21 different zip codes that students are coming from, so there are lots of students coming from districts that are surrounding us. There are a lot of students that were doing homeschool before they're coming back into public school, and there are a lot of schools that were doing online charter schools that are coming back to traditional schools as well. So probably half of our population came from Seminole Public Schools.
Representative Caldwell, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a little off topic, but can you, I'll make sure I'm thinking of the right school. Can you kind of give us like a real brief kind of understanding of kind of how and why this school got started?
Sure. So, again, we opened last year, and I came in last year to help start the school. So a lot of the beginnings and startings of it was before I was here. But there is a local business in town, Enviro Systems, that you might have heard of, and they've created, there's also a nonprofit called Advanced Rural Education. Paul Campbell is the person that kind of helped to get that together, and really just wanting to get together with a group of parents and and families and local businesses that just wanted to have another option for families in that area. As I mentioned, in terms of college going, I think it's around 42% of students in Seminole County go on from high school into college. And so really trying to just increase the opportunity for students in that area to let them know that college is something that they can attain, and to really help them through that process is the reason that we got that started.
Thank you, Mr. Hawthorne. We unfortunately are out of time, so Representative Rosecrans and Representative Caldwell, looks like they have some additional questions. If we have time at the end, we can follow back with you.
Wonderful. I invite any of you guys to come visit our campus if you're in the area.
All right, thank you, Mr. Hawthorne. At this time, I'd like to ask Mr. Jim Matthews to come forward. He is the superintendent at New Lima Public Schools, which is also in Seminole County. He has some printouts as well. If you have not received those, please raise your hand.
First of all, I apologize, I am a podium speaker only, so I'm not used to doing this way. My name is Jim Matthews, I'm superintendent of school at New Lima. We are 6 miles from Seminole Academy. So I will say that, yes, we are one of those districts in that area. I'd like to thank Representative Taylor for inviting me today. I'd like to thank Representative Baker for allowing me to speak to the committee. And also, before I forget, I want to introduce my wife, Elizabeth, who's here with me today. Elizabeth is a retired elementary school teacher. She taught 31 years, all of them in Oklahoma. And as you can tell by my hair, this is my 47th year in education in Oklahoma. And I plan to tell you about this from a rural perspective. I've been mostly in small schools, and New Lima is a small school district. We have 275 students. We're a Class B school. I was looking at the free and reduced lunch rate. Ours is 90%. I've been in several schools that were 100%. Our little school is located 6 miles out of Seminole, halfway between Seminole and Wewoka. We have 75 students in the high school. I want to regress just for a moment to tell you a little bit about our school, and then I'll go on. Our little school has a long and proud tradition. Mainly, we were associated with athletic success from past years. Many state championships in boys and girls basketball and in baseball. But we have also consistently produced high academic test scores, highest in the county for many years. And we have an outstanding number of college graduates. We have graduated outstanding number for a school our small as we are. We also had one of the legends in administration in Oklahoma, and Mr. Bryce Hill. He was our superintendent for 40 years, and he was a legend in Oklahoma school administration. So the little school has really done well. We were originally an all-black settlement. The 7 towns that were originally all-black settlements, Lima was one of them. Lima now has a population of 53 people. Our school has no business. It has no stores. It has no post office. We're just a school sitting out there, okay? And we have 275 students, and we just sit out in the middle of nowhere. So facilities for us is quite a problem. Facility funding in rural schools really comes down to the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. The major way to achieve facility funding, of course, is to have a high evaluation, high tax base in your district. If you have that, great. If you don't, you're in trouble. And the other one is to be able to pass a bond for construction of facilities. In states where all of the money has to be raised locally by a smaller district or any district, then you have problems. I'm gonna give you an example. I've been in extremes both ways. I taught at Valiant School District, which is in McCurtain County. Valiant has the Weyerhaeuser plant, has a valuation between $90 and $100 million. easy with that kind of situation where most of the tax money's coming from Weyerhaeuser. They were really poor schools, had WPA buildings. And then when the Weyerhaeuser plant was built years ago, that school became a rich district immediately. And so facilities at Valiant were excellent. And then I've been at the other extreme. For 17 years, I was the superintendent at Sasakwa, which is also in Seminole County. Now I have a handout for you today on Sasakwa's funding to show you, people come before you and say, we're broke, we don't have any money. I know you hear that. I want you to just see our sheet. If you look at that, on the day I started, my first day superintendent at Sasakwa, you'll see the general fund, 0. The building fund, 0. Child nutrition fund, 0. Now that's broke, ladies and gentlemen. You might have seen people poor before, but I bet you've never seen a school where all 3 funds zeroed out. We had 134 students left. We had a 1937 high school building and a 1937 junior high building. 2 rooms of which had been condemned. You say, oh, well, you definitely need to pass a bond. Yes, and the patrons were ready to do that because we feared the school was going to fall in on top of our students while they were there. We had water coming through the walls of the building, not through the ceiling, through the walls. So, yes, they were ready to pass a bond. Our bonding capacity, our evaluation of our district was $3.5 million. We could bond for $350,000. Now, if you think you can build a building for $350,000, it's not going to happen. Even that was 1996, it was still not going to happen. The only way we were able to get ourselves out of that mess was we did bond for $350,000. And Oklahoma that year started a plan. They've changed the name of it since then, but at that time we had QZABs, some of you might remember that, Qualified Zone Academy bonds. And we were able to get a loan for $200,000 at 1.3%. That was pretty good. So we actually was able to build a junior high for $550,000 with our bond money and a QZAB. You couldn't build a junior high for $550,000 now. Costs continue to rise. So we built one. We connected a new building to an old building because that's all we could do was the junior high. Our building was a high school, a junior high auditorium connected it in a U shape, and we were able to build a junior high. So it makes a difference not only if you've got to have an evaluation that's high, or you're not going to get a new building anyhow. So we needed a new high school as well. You say, well, you could have bonded in a series, 3 bonds back to back to back. I couldn't do that because if I did that, there would be years and years, probably 15 years before I could build another building. And I had a high school that was about to fall in. So we waited, and finally we did bond in a series, $1,050,000, of which we still owed $180,000 on the first bond. So we could only bond for $870,000. And the only thing that saved us, if you know anything about Sasakwa, we have a huge Native American population there. So we got impact aid money for years and years that we just saved up, and that's illegal now. Now they won't let you save it from year to year, but back then they would. We saved our impact aid money and was able to build a new high school eventually. Now there was a school that had 134 students, 1937 buildings, no funding capacity. That's the kind of school they would close now. That school was able to pull out of that. Now when I left, we had 273 students, which is more than double the size. We carried over $1 million. That school is still a viable school today. I've been gone from there 8 years. They still have about 240 students. So, but that was a school that could have closed because of the rules on buildings. That was a bad situation. So you can see there's a lot of difference between a school like Valiant and one like Sasakwa. When you get in that situation, you can't keep putting funds into a dilapidated building. I mean, that becomes the quandary. Do you do that? Our buildings was dangerous. The river's about to fall in, water coming through the walls, so we're in a major quandary. Do we put money into these buildings? And if we do, most schools will. Most little schools will do that. And I'm gonna tell you why they will do that. They're in a desperate fight to keep from being closed or consolidated. Yeah, that's right, the dreaded C word. It scares a lot of us in rural schools when we get in that situation. It's just like putting one more nail in the coffin for rural schools in Oklahoma when you do that. We were already struggling. And when you lose the school, you lose the community. And how much money should you invest in maintenance and repairs of a dilapidated building? Aren't you just wasting your funds? But if you don't, you're sitting in the building and it continues to deteriorate. Many patrons view the outside of the buildings and you don't think everything's fine. They don't know all the trouble you're having in a building. And in our case, they waited till the building almost fell in. Now we have the same thing at New Lima situation with some aspects. We can't pass a bond because we're a 57% transfer school. Almost everybody in our district that lives there, their kids, a lot of their kids, we have a big community out there called Quail Run, all their kids go to Seminole. We have all kinds of transfers into our school, but all of our major supporters are not living in our district. So our chances of passing a bond are very slim. Because of that, we now have an underground storm cellar that when it rains, our kids stand in water up to about their ankles. And that causes us to wait longer. When a big storm comes, we hold our kids in school as long as we can. We don't want them to have to go and stand in that water. That's a dangerous situation when you're holding that. It could be too late someday. So what do? Do I put my kids in that water and let the patrons see that? Maybe they'll vote for a bond? These are the kind of things that happen in small school America. You say, well, you could have done other things. We tried to get a FEMA grant for our new facility. And, you get stopped at every turn in a small school sometimes. We go over to do that, fill out the forms, yes, you'll be in good shape. No. Seminole County doesn't have a mitigation plan. I didn't know if you knew that, Representative Taylor. They have no mitigation plan, so if anything ever happens to anything in Seminole County, there's no money for Seminole. The city of Seminole has one, but the county of Seminole does not. So I went in and talked to our excise board and, tried to get after them. That doesn't seem to be, they did finally do a little bit to help us. Supposed to have a mitigation plan done in March, but it's always something, seems like. Most district patrons are older in our district, and like I say, they send their kids out of the district. Our neighbor, Seminole, just passed a $23 million bond, so they're sitting 6 miles from us. This is another problem. One of the big problems for us would be, let's say if we did try to pass a bond, is the famous supermajority rule. 60% of the voters have to vote to pass a bond. I've asked my legislators over the last 20 years, I guess 10 or 12 times about why in the world do we have to keep a 60% supermajority rule? And all they ever tell me is that is untouchable. I've heard that a bunch of times. Said that is untouchable, you're wasting your time. There's big time lobbyists for that, and that you will never get that changed. Maybe so, but it's a really big problem for us. I don't see what the problem is if the majority of the people in your district want to vote a bond for your school. Why there has to be a 60% supermajority. It really makes it hard on schools like us, especially with as many people as we have that support us not living in the district. Of course, obviously you can get help from other areas if you have an electrical plant in your district, or a paper mill, or oil and gas pipelines, or big business. We have none of those. And I gave you an example of 2 schools that are across the state from each other, and they're different size. So you say, well, that's not really a good example. Well, you just have to go to Pittsburgh County then, where Kiowa is one of the richest districts in the state, and 3 miles from it is Pittsburgh, which is one of the poorest districts in the state. It all depends on the situation, your local tax-based revenue, and what you've got in your district.
Superintendent Matthews, you have less than 2 minutes if you would
Okay.
like to start summarizing.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to say that there's, like Mr. Hines said, there's only 4 states that do nothing at all with the district capital cost. I did not know there's 5 states in the United States that fund every bit of it 100%, and the rest of them fund various degrees. So what's our solution? I have 3 things to say for the solution, and a couple of them probably won't go anywhere. One of them is, why not review the 10% max on bond capacities when you pass a bond? Why not review the 60% supermajority vote requirement? And the other one, how come we can't provide, as we're talking about today, capital outlay funds for approved projects, like you're talking about the school building equalization fund, based on need, and let the lower-level school districts get their support first? That would be my solution to this problem. Thank you.
Members, we have 30 seconds if anyone has a quick question.
If you talk long enough, you don't have to answer a question. Thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent.
All right, thank you, Mr. Matthews. One thing I would like to say briefly before we go on to the next speaker, the temptation from many of you that are urban legislators is to say, well, just consolidate. Well, that's not a fix-all. You may think that saves a lot of money. You may think that is the long-term solution. But as Mr. Matthews stated, some of these small schools like New Lima are our best performing schools in rural communities. New Lima has performed very well over the past at least couple decades that I know of academically. So to me, consolidation, for one, is a bad word in my district, so I can't even say it out loud except up here at the Capitol. Number 2, I just don't see it as a fix-all. So I just wanted to make that note in addition to what Mr. Matthews said. So at this time, I'd like to introduce to you Mr. Russ Simnick. He is from the National Association of Public Charter Schools, and he's going to kind of tell us about what other states do and how they address the affluent issues.
Good morning, and thank you, members of the committee, for the invite to come out here and speak. Again, Russ Simnick, National Alliance of Public Charter Schools. So what I'm here to talk about today is there a funding gap between traditional public schools and charter schools? So the questions are, why are some kids that could even live in the same apartment building be funded at a different level, but they both attend public schools? And if so, by how much? So in 2005, the first study was conducted by Fordham University. They found that there was about a 21.7% gap. Great time to get a phone call. Sorry about that. And then in 2010, Ball State University followed up on this study, and they found just about the same thing. It was about a 19.2% gap. They found on average the schools, that each public charter school student received about $2,300 less. And that adds up when you have a school of 100, 200, 300 students. The most recent one was University of Arkansas in 2017. They focused on urban school districts, and they found that there was, again, about a 21.7% gap. The lowest was 4.8 in New Mexico, and the highest was 39.5 in South Carolina. So study after study has shown us that when a kid leaves a traditional public school and goes to a charter school, only 4/5 of the revenue, the resources, follow that kid nationwide. So why is that? There's really 2 key reasons. First of all is the lack of access to local funding, and second is lack of access to facilities funding. So I'd like to just touch on a couple states that are addressing the gap on the local funding: Colorado, Florida, New Mexico, and Utah. So Colorado law provides that charter schools are entitled to 100% of the district per pupil operating revenues for each pupil they enroll. It also requires districts to share locally raised mill levy override funds, and a fund has been established to equalize funding for state authorized schools. They provide $5.5 million in funding. Florida law allows them access to all categorical funding, including transportation. And New Mexico law provides that they must be funded at no less than 98% of what traditional public schools are. And Utah law provides charter schools to receive, actually, they get the property taxes made up. Colorado, okay, now I want to switch to facilities. Colorado law provides charter school public students with $300 per pupil for facilities. They also require that that the charter schools have to be involved in the process if there's a mill levy. Indiana created a $20 million grant program to disperse per charter school student just for facilities. Back in 2015, they updated that to $750 in the last budget. And in Tennessee awards grants, they have $18 million appropriated for the first 3 years, back in 2017 for facilities. So we know that the problem exists, we know the reason, and states have taken a number of creative ways to address this. I'm sorry, I never have anxiety like this when I present.
We truly are a friendly group. Do you need a chair or what? We can get either for
I'm
you.
fine.
All right. Are you ready for questions?
I am.
Okay, very good. Members, does anyone have a question at this time? We will start with Representative Problems on it.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can you talk about what those other states are doing with regard to private dollars and the public-private relationship that exists between charter schools and their private entities, and what funding streams flow out of private dollars into charter schools that, I mean, just for my own information.
Yeah. So thank you. So a lot of charter schools really rely on foundation money, private donations. I want to keep this clear that we're not talking about public dollars going to private schools. This isn't like the ESA or anything like that. But I know a lot of charter schools that really build in 20–30% of their budget from private fundraising because they have to.
Representative Walker, you are recognized.
Okay, first of all, thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for coming today. But prior to the creation of these charter schools, we didn't have that inequity because there weren't charter schools. So part of the problem, I guess, isn't it true then, that part of the problem is that we created a system of charter schools without allocating monies for building revenue, et cetera?
Yes.
Okay, so your way
For follow-up.
For follow-up, thank you, Madam Chair. So your redress would be that we need to put more money into the charter schools, but will this come at the expense of the traditional brick and mortar schools?
So it would certainly have yes and no. It depends on how you attempt to do it. So some states, like New Mexico, they do allocate the local dollars to go back to the charter schools, but other states like Colorado they fund charter schools at a higher per pupil level, so it doesn't impact those districts.
For follow-up.
Okay, well, my last follow-up, thank you, Madam Chair, you've been very patient with me. The challenge is to develop a way to fund the charter schools fully without coming to the expense of the public schools, and to do it so in a way that fully funds every school. Is that doable in Oklahoma?
Well, I don't want to come off as an expert on Oklahoma finance. I brought the national perspective. It is doable anywhere. There's a number of solutions to do it. It just depends on how you approach it. I mean, is it participating in mill levies? Is it, per pupil amount like Indiana does? And I do want to add that the per pupil amount in Indiana is based on performance of the school too. They have to be a high performing school. Well, at least a C school or better.
Representative Caldwell, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate you coming today, and I know you kind of gave more of a national perspective, so this question may be for you or maybe for Dr. Heim again. But I think the solution we're talking about today is a solution that would go to both traditional public schools and to charter schools. Is that your understanding as well?
That's my understanding. I don't know the details of it. That's my understanding. I just really want to say, I want to applaud. I haven't seen this kind of cooperation between traditional public schools and charter schools that often. So I really like the fact that you guys are all coming together on that.
For follow-up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And so, in Oklahoma, our charter schools are public schools. That's the way it is across the country. So if those charter schools went away, where do those kids go to school?
They have to go to school somewhere, so I assume they would go to the traditional public school that they live in, or one close that they could get to.
Follow-up.
Thank you for that. I felt it was an obvious answer, so thank you. Just kind of building the case here. But so the point being is that we've got kids that would be going to a traditional public school who are now going to another public school. So So the cost is gonna be borne by that public school, we're just shifting locations. So we're really not talking about much different than, so in my own district, we built new buildings. We built 2 new elementary schools. No one made the argument that we are siphoning off funds from one building to another. So we're talking about public students being educated by public schools, so the cost would be borne no matter what by public schools. Would you follow that logic with me?
Yes.
Thank you.
Are there any additional questions, members? Okay, thank you so much,
Thank you.
Mr. Simnick. Now, I'm going to call back up, Mr. Hawthorne from the Academy of Seminole. We still had members with questions, and since we still have time, we're gonna go ahead and follow back around to those questions. And we will start with Representative Rosecrans.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for coming in today. The question I had, pretty simple, what were some examples of the third-party funding that you have out there?
Sure. As was discussed a little bit earlier, we're relying heavily on fundraising. So we did receive a federal grant through the Oklahoma Public School Resource Center. It's a charter school program grant. It was a $600,000 grant that really helped us to get started. So all of our books, technology, all of that came through that grant. The Walton Family Foundation also helped with the startup grant as well. We did a lot of local funding as well, so we had some corporations and some individuals in Seminole County that helped.
Thank you.
Representative Caldwell, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mine was actually a follow-up, but I can't remember what I was following up, so I will wait.
I will just say one last thing to that too. So a lot of, over half of our money last year came from doing a lot of fundraising. So that was money that wouldn't have come into the district otherwise.
Representative Walter, you are recognized.
So once I had this table with one leg too long, so I saw it a little bit off and then it was too short. What happens if we fully fund charter schools and then on top of that they have additional funding? Won't that create a new layer of inequity based on the choice of donors and contributors?
I think that for any of our donors, the long-term goal is for us to be self-supporting. So I think a lot of the money that we received are designated for really startup funds, but not intended to continue for a length.
For follow-up.
So by self-supporting, do you mean that someday we'll be off the hook for paying for your school?
Sorry, self-supporting in terms of like traditional public schools, in terms of federal money and state money.
Representative Provenzano, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So as the charter school entity in your area, there are certain standards that are relaxed to allow you to be the charter, which is by design. So what standards have you requested to be relaxed in your area that public schools are still held to?
It's interesting because I actually came from a private school background and helping to start a private school in Okmulgee, where there are a lot of relaxed standards. But with charter schools, we really do a lot of the same things that public schools do. We have the same state testing, we have the same financial responsibilities, we have the same federal responsibilities for serving students with disabilities. And really, I think probably the biggest thing that may be a little bit different is certification. So we still really strive to have certification for all of our teachers. But, for example, we have a Spanish teacher from Spain that came in and did an alternative certification. So just, that's probably one of the things that we're able to do a little bit differently.
Representative Caldwell, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and again, this may be a little bit out of your area of expertise, you don't feel comfortable answering it, maybe Dr. Hine can answer it, but you talked about your private fundraising, and I know you're in Seminole County. Let me see how I want to say this. You have the ability to fundraise privately. Would you agree with me that your public school there, located in Seminole as well, would also have that same opportunity to fundraise privately?
Sure.
That is all the questions that we have for you. At this time, I will turn this over back to you, Representative.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess at this time I would ask if maybe there were any more questions for Mr. Matthews. I think, as he stated, if you talk long enough, you don't have to take questions. But unfortunately, Mr. Simnick didn't talk long enough, so now Mr. Matthews gets to take questions.
Representative Walden, you are recognized.
So I've done a little research mentioned, there does exist a provision for creating a fund for rural schools, but then I understand that the state has never really put money into the fund. Would that be the redress that we need to create a fund that allows poor rural districts to apply on a need basis to build their schools?
That would be my opinion, that it should be on a need basis, and the ones in the worst state should be given priority.
For follow-up?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the legislation exists, just not the funding.
That's correct. And of course, that goes in direct, we used the C word a while ago, there's people that's for that, and they would be against something like that. But, yes, to take care of your schools that are in real bad shape facilities-wise, that would be the answer out of that.
Are there any other additional questions for Superintendent Matthews? Okay, Representative West, you are recognized.
If I remember correctly, you said there was a 6-mile difference.
Yes.
Does your school offer the same courses that are available in Seminole schools with regards to AP classes and all of those things? Could you give me a little bit of
We
that?
do, and the only reason why we, even when you start talking about virtual situation from a public school, New Lima has the capabilities of doing that, but our personnel, our people, this is so rural, a lot of those don't have computers, they don't have things like this, so we can't, that's the only reason why we can't reach that. Now, the academy was taking some of our students, and of course, I don't wanna get into the academy too bad, but, we've had a situation where, they had their attorney call all the schools in the, county and have them give them a list of their students so they could recruit those students away from us. So this is sort of a problem with public schools, especially in our area, in the rural areas, dealing with people like that, because like I told you, we don't have any businesses. We don't have anybody giving us $600,000 grant, so we're not playing on an equal field with them at all.
Thank you, members. Doesn't look like there's any additional questions. Thank you, Superintendent.
All right. All right, looks like we have wrapped it up early.